Nate, how we doing on participants here? We got most everybody in?
I say we can just go right ahead, sure.
Okay, great. Well, as I said, my name's Tom Hendricks. I'm with Principal Funds, and I'll be your host tonight. I cover several states in the Midwest, and I've got a couple of gentlemen here with me that do the same thing that I do, but in different states. I've got Nate Linderman there in the beautiful Iowa Hawkeye polo, and Caleb Thompson in the headphones there. Wanted to thank everybody for joining us. This is going to be a really exciting event. I think it's really cool, something very unique that we've not actually done before. But luckily, our golf pro, Daniel, has done it several times. But also, like, just to give a quick thank you to Nate, Caleb, and I's partner, McNeil. She's been a big help in putting this all together. So thanks, McNeil. Appreciate that. So with that being said, as you probably know, the world of golf has exploded quite a bit, and I had a chance to talk to Daniel a little bit last night, and he threw out some of these stats to me that I thought were just kind of mind-blowing. 106 million people in the United States played golf either on a course or off a course, followed golf on TV or online, read about the game, or listened to a golf-related podcast in 2021, which equates to about 1 in 3 Americans. 37.5 million played golf, both on course and off the course, so things like Golf Simulator or Top Golf. And then the record number of people who played golf on a golf course for the first time in 2021 was 3.2 million people. So that's amazing to me. So I'm glad that we've got somebody that is a pro that can help walk through the game with us. And today we're going to focus on our short game. As I mentioned before, I'm very pleased to be joined by Daniel Guest from Imagen Golf to help us all take that next step in our game. Daniel, I believe you're joining us just from right outside Philadelphia, where you founded Imagen Golf 10 years ago after a very long and successful career in the corporate America. Daniel's a certified Titleist instructor, which I did a little research on that. It consists of 3 different levels, a lot of man hours. I think it equated to over 400 hours, if that's right, Daniel.
That is about right. Too many.
And your approach to instruction is to kind of teach a skills-based system that allows really for the golfer's individuality to be preserved while fixing their most detrimental flaws, and at the same time have a lot of fun. You're also the best-selling author of a golf instruction book I saw on your website called Unleash the Golf Within.
Yep.
And this is, like I said, not his first time doing this. His company in the last 3 years has conducted more than 3,000 virtual golf lessons. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Daniel. He's gonna give us his presentation, and then we'll have some time for some questions and answers after he's all finished up. Thank you. Appreciate everybody joining us.
Hey Tom, thanks for that introduction. What Tom didn't mention is that the camera makes me about 20 pounds heavier than I really am. So I just want to put that disclosure out there. No, seriously, those numbers are staggering. And just the fact that golf is touching 1 of 3 people in America just kind of blew me away when Tom and I were talking about it. And he is right. We founded this company 10 years ago. Our slogan initially was Imagine Golf Differently. So we really wanted to take a different tact, if you would, on how traditional golf instruction was taught, in that it was all technique based for almost 100 years. Everything about it was bend your arm a certain way, golf a certain way, look like a certain golfer. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it takes a lot of time, energy, and effort. And the average golfer would only take about 1 or 2 lessons, even if they took a lesson, because only about 10% of all Americans even take lessons. And if you juxtapose that against our European counterparts, 50% of them take lessons, and against our Asian counterparts, almost 75% of them take lessons. So Americans are unique and almost stubborn in that they won't take a ton of instruction, and if that instruction wasn't taking hold and was difficult to apply, they weren't doing it, and golfers were leaving the game. So about 3 years in, we changed our slogan to Golf Better Guaranteed. And the reason we did that is because it had more of a marketing flair to it, if you would, and the concept was still the same. We were going to teach golfers to pull a swing from within them and not try to teach them a certain technique, if you would. So About that same time, I got introduced to the Titleist concept. And Titleist is simple in that they don't believe there's one way to swing a golf club, and there's infinite ways to swing a golf club. And if anyone on this camera or on this call today watches professional,
I get no benefit from that angle.
That's all right.
I love to help people avoid them.
If anybody on the call is have watched golf on the tour these days, you'll see more unique swings than ever. You have gentlemen like a Tony Finau that brings the club only about halfway. You have people like a Bubba Watson that does all kinds of crazy things in his backswing. And then you have the traditional golfers that really, Dustin Johnson, that really, they call him Gumby for a reason. He really bends his back and really bends his body, contorts his body. So Titleist came up with this theory that, look, like I said, there's not one way to swing a golf club, but there is one efficient way for every student to swing a golf club, or every golfer for that matter. And there's the rub. That's what we try to figure out here at Imagen Golf and Titleist in general, is that how do we figure out how to make that swing more efficient, all right? We're going to go through some of the the biggest flaws that we see. Josh here to my right here is my assistant pro in-house, if you would. He's going to be the student. He's done about 5,000 lessons. I've done about 27,000 lessons. So at this point, we both have seen it almost all, to be honest. But there are two major flaws before we get started in our short game lesson that most golfers need to overcome before they can maximize their swing or make it more efficient. And the first flaw is too steep of a golf swing. So Josh is going to line up for this golf ball here. And as he takes the club back, he's going to bring this club almost vertical, like this. And if you'll notice, you'll see that this club head here, this shaft, is about 90 degrees. When a golfer does this, and when they bring this shaft back down, go ahead, Josh, it comes down very steep. The term thick or thin, or hitting half the golf ball or hitting a big chunk behind the golf ball, these things come into play a lot when a golfer has a very high or vertical steep swing like that. So the first thing that we try to do with people is we try to get them to have more of a flat or wider swing. Josh is in the same setup here, but now he's going to bring the club more around him. And as you notice here, this club is laying at about 70 degrees instead of the 90 degrees that he was originally at up here. Now when Josh brings the club down, it's going to be a much less steep descent and a much more gradual descent to the golf ball. That's important because as this club comes down this way, it comes in the same zone, if you would, or the same space where the golf ball is consistently. When someone brings the club up like this, that's not the case. It'll come on the inside of the golf ball, the outside of the golf ball. It'll on top of the golf ball, below the golf ball. So it's very difficult to have a consistent swing with a very vertical swing there. So that's the first thing that we see. The second, and by the way, how we get people to work through that is we put them in a drill set. So if Josh came to us and he had this real vertical, high, steep swing here, we put him in a drill set that's going to force him to move his body differently and put that club in the right spot. And we call this the WID drill protocol. So Josh is going to demonstrate that. He's in his regular stance first. Go to your regular stance first. And he's simply going to drop his back foot back about halfway. Now when Josh brings that club back, it's very difficult to keep it high as he normally would, and it starts to come around him again. Everything we do at Titleist is drill-based. So I don't stand there and say, Josh, lower your club, flatten your club, make a wider swing. We don't do any of that. We actually just pick the drill that's appropriate for the challenge that the golfer has, and Josh would do this drill. There's something about the number 7 that is important with our brain that we remember more. So the drill sets are in 7 repetitions. So Josh would do 7 repetitions in that drill set, and then he would come back and do his regular swing. And the concept and science behind it is real simple, is that if we're forcing someone to move biomechanically different because of a drill set or a stance change, if you would, when Josh comes back into his regular stance, some of that's going to bleed its way into it in a very short amount of time. We're going to do that 3 different times, or a total of 42 different golf balls. So all of our drills are around that same protocol, where you're 7 in the drill, 7 in the actual stance, your normal stance, and we do that no less than 3 times. So the second thing we would work on with people here, or the second biggest flaw we see, is sequencing. The sequencing or tempo in a golf swing is very critical. Most people, when they come to see us, they do not engage their lower body, right? And it's a very armsy, upper body type of swing. So Josh is going to demonstrate what that looks like. He's going to bring this club back, and you can see his lower body barely moves at all. And he hasn't turned his body whatsoever like this, like he's supposed to in a golf swing. So the sequencing is critical because if we don't get the proper sequencing, we cannot hit a golf ball the appropriate distance. Almost all the clubs will go about the same distance with the exception of some of the bigger clubs. And we see this a lot with beginner golfers. We see this with golfers that are stuck, if you would, in their career, or excuse me, in their golf life. And we see this definitely as people age in golf, all right? So we're going to go over the sequencing real quick, and Josh is going to show you what it's supposed to look like. The sequencing is pretty simple. It starts on the backswing with our hands, our arms, his shoulders, and then his hips. From there, he's going to reverse that order. Hips first, shoulders second, arms third, and then his hands. And if he does that properly, he doesn't have to swing real hard with his hands. That was actually pretty good, man. He doesn't have to swing hard with his hands. He now just has to swing in sync with his body, all right? Now he's going to show you what that looks like full speed. And just a little disclaimer for those that are watching here. We have a beautiful hole here, so if he hits it to the left, we're going to hear water sound here. But hopefully, given his ability, we're not hitting it to the left at all today. Here we go. That's pretty good. And that's almost perfect sequencing, if you would, where his hips absolutely started the downswing. So two things that we look at in a golfer before we start anything is that we make sure that their swing plane is appropriate, that allows them to be successful. And the second piece is the sequencing. Do they have the proper sequencing? And if they don't, then we'll work on that. Once we get that fixed, if you would, and that doesn't take long, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes sometimes, then we actually go into the lesson. And today's lesson is about the short game. Most individuals, golfers I should say, do not practice the short game enough, and it results in higher scores than what the golfer's ability typically is. About 50% of your strokes will be from 100 yards and in for the typical golfer, including putts, of course. So when you say that out loud, you would think, in fact, we would practice that a little bit more. But Josh and I always joke with the students, look, there's nothing sexy about hitting a ball 15 yards if I can hit it with a driver 95 yards, in Josh's case, 300 yards, right? So most Americans and most golfers in general would rather work on their bigger clubs and the sexier shots, if you would, than the smaller 10 to 15 to 25 and even 50-yard shots. But I assure you, if you really want to lower your scores, if you pay more attention to your short game, you'll absolutely do that. On average, when we give a short game, we call it a session, if you would, our students lower their scores by about 10%. So if you're shooting 100, you're now in the 90s, and you're wishing you'd take this class a long time ago. So one thing we don't do in our short game, for those of you who have watched golf on television, these guys on television, the professional athletes, are uber talented. They are uber athletes. Josh and I are not. All right? And most of our students are not. So for that reason, we don't teach the same techniques and skill sets that you'll see on tour. Phil Mickelson comes to mind, who is an absolute master with his wedges. He can make a ball go 7 yards, he can make a ball go 70 yards, and everything in between with one club. By simply just finessing that shot and taking something off the shot, putting more on it, changing his hands, changing his stance. When you just say that out loud again, most individuals can't do that. So we have a very tactical approach to this short game. And it revolves around 7-7-7. We'll introduce that in a second here. But all we do is, we don't, and by the way, just as a little footnote, we don't, for those that are on the call that have a sand wedge and a pitching wedge, and you use your pitching wedge for all your pitching shots, and you use your sand wedge the only time you use it when you're in the sand, this is going to be new to you. Because we don't subscribe to that. We just see the sand wedge and the pitching wedge as just two other implements or two other clubs, and you're going to use your sand wedge plenty of times outside of the sand. So if that's the habit you've gotten into, rubbish, as my grandfather used to say, we need to figure that out and start using that club more. A sand wedge by design is about 56 degrees. A pitching wedge on average is between 49 and 52. And a lob wedge, or a 60-degree wedge, is just that, 60 degrees. So we typically introduce those three types of clubs with our students. Josh happens to have a pitching wedge in his hand today, all right? And we're going to go through some of the other shots as well, or some other clubs that we just mentioned as well. But ultimately, it's a real basic system. Once the golfer understands how far they hit their clubs. So Josh is going to hit a regular shot here. Full speed, regular shot with his pitching wedge. Stay out of the water. Hit it a little thin, but it's good. And this computer's going to tell us how far that is. That's 128 yards. He normally hits that about 135, 137, but he hit that off the toe. Now, Josh, show us a half swing. He took it up a little higher than that, but pretty good. And that ball went 124. I said half swing, Josh. Here we go. Nice and easy. There we go. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the golfer to get a feel for what that half swing is. And Josh took it up a little bit too high, like most students do. So now we're going to show you how to make sure that that is repeatable over and over and over again. Yes, Morgan?
Someone has something.
Huh?
Someone was saying something.
Yeah? Okay. So Josh, you're going to come down here? Yep, we have a question or something? No?
Virtual golf.
Okay, here we go. All right, so Josh is down here. Now, instead of just saying, Josh, take a half swing, we're going to put in his mind that, look, his hands are not going to go above his waist. And this is the drill piece. So Josh is going to take his hands, and the club is not going to hinge higher than that. All right? So from here, if he normally turns in his full swing about 4 inches, Josh does, in his half swing, he's going to turn 2 inches, half of 4, and he's going to follow through like he normally does, and that'll look just like that. Now, if he normally hits the ball 135 and he hits a half swing without letting that club come up, he's actually going to hit this ball half the distance, and it's going to be very, very, very predictable, and he's going to demonstrate that right now. Pretty good. 64 yards, almost right on the money. And what's nice about this technique is that we don't really care when we're actually given the lessons, if you would. We're not concerned with how great the contact is, where the ball goes. All we're really concerned about is, does that club head come up and his hands come up the same distance every time? And if it does that, then we can exchange that club. I could put a lob wedge in his hand as an example, where he might only hit that 80 yards. Now that same exact stroke there, that half swing, is only going to go 40 yards. So it's a very, very, very predictable way, and it takes all the finesse, if you would, out of the person's mind. When you take the finesse game out of it, you've remedy a lot of common challenges, right? As an example, if Josh is trying to hit this full speed, right, or full swing, excuse me, but only half, he can many times blade this ball or hit just the bottom half of this golf ball, and he's going to show you what that'll look like right now.
You want to thin it?
Yeah, thin it, yeah. So we've all done that, right, where we try to take a little bit off the club, if you would, and we hit only a top half of the golf ball, and I didn't see how far that goes, Josh. What, 120 some? Yep. So it went 120 some yards, all right? We were only trying to go 60 yards, and he just hit it 120, all right? So the technique that we're talking about here is a very low risk, very high reward technique in that you're not likely going to be able to take a half swing and push this ball 120 yards or 60 yards past the target, all right? So what about a 30-yard shot, though, right, or a 40-yard shot? What would you do there? So Josh is going to show you. So instead of taking the club up halfway, now Josh is just going to take the club up a quarter, and the club head is not going to come above his knees. Likewise, getting back to this turn, if he normally turned 4 inches, he's now only going to turn 1 inch, and he's going to follow through appropriately. And if he does this properly, the ball's going to go about 35 yards. Here we go. Looks pretty good. 33.4. He's a good student. All right? And again, very, very, very predictable. The only technique that we're really grooving here is, in fact, his club head here. So as instructors, all we're worried about, line up again, all we're worried about is the student turning 1 inch? Is the club head here, right about their knees, and do they follow through 100% with their waistline and chest at the target? If they do, that golf ball will go 1/4. So a quarter swing, it will go 1/4 of the distance that they normally hit. I guarantee it. All right. Now, you can imagine every club. Now, you can even have like a 9-iron if you would. Josh hits a 9-iron probably about 150 yards. So now his half swing with a 9-iron is going to go about 75. The trajectory for a 9-iron is going to be lower than a wedge. And so now he has what we call a bump and run shot, if you would, from 75. He doesn't need to take this big looping swing, if you would, or big looping shot. If there's no hazards or nothing in front of him, he can just simply take his 9-iron out, take a half swing, and just bump that thing up there about 75 yards. So again, it's a very, very, very tactical and predictable way on how to dial in your distances, all right? Now what we do with the student here, line up again. When I said about 7, 7, 7, all Josh would do here, if he was a student today, is we would work on hitting 7 half shots. So go ahead, Josh. Yep. He'd hit 7 of those. We'd start, by the way, we'd start with 7 full shots, so we know what that is. He would hit 7 half shots, and then he would hit 7 quarter shots. Go ahead. Took that up a little high, but still good. Let's see what it did. 39 yards, so just went a little bit further than what we talked. So if he hit 7 full shots with that club, 7 half shots with that club, and 7 quarters, then he's done with that club, regardless of the performance. Because again, we're not concerned with the performance of the shot so much. We're only trying for now to get the distance of the backswing roped in, if you would, or dialed in, if you would. So now he's going to hit a bigger wedge, or smaller wedge, depending on how you say it. 56-degree wedge. This is a typical sand wedge, and he's going to hit the same exact shots. He's going to hit a full shot. And that ball went so high it didn't come down. Is it coming? Oh, it is coming down. There we go. We got a distance there?
Yeah, 90.
90 yards. All right. Very predictable. He's going to show you a half swing. He's pretty good at this. 66, just a little too far, but actually a really good shot. And then a quarter shot. And you can see I think you can see the trajectory is almost 40% higher with this club because of the loft, and that's right on the number there. It's almost 26 yards there. But because of this club's loft, it has 60 degrees of loft, so this club is going to get up very quickly and land very softly. And that's it. So we would go through a series of 3 clubs with every individual, right? And by the way, if they don't have 3 wedges, and they only had a sand wedge and a pitching wedge, then we'd introduce the 9-iron for them. But they would leave with 3 different clubs, and they would leave with 9 different shots from inside of 100 yards, all right? Now let's say we only had to go 10 yards or whatever, right? What would we do there? So if Josh is here, and he's only got 10 yards to go, and this is an important shot, he would just dial that quarter swing back just a little bit, and not swing as hard through, and literally just drop the golf ball down, and sure enough, 11.2 yards. So once someone has the basic technique of half shots and quarter shots, then we can refine those techniques and even take some off of either one of those, and we can go what we call 7 o'clock swings, 9 o'clock swings, 3 o'clock swings. So now you're really attacking the golf course instead of just surviving the golf course. But the key to making this technique work is really just that, is making sure that this backswing is predictable, that you're turning half of what you normally do for the half swing with a full shoulder turn towards the golf ball, waistline and chest at the target. And on a quarter swing, your hands, or your club head, is not coming above your knees. Nice little quarter turn, in my case about an inch as well, and a full turn right through the golf ball as well. That's it. It's no more complicated than that. Here's what we don't teach at Titleist. We don't teach any of these techniques here. Josh is going to demonstrate a common technique that we see all the time where there's a lot of weight forward. So he's got a lot of weight forward on his front foot. Everything about this swing is going to be hands oriented, and it's very unpredictable. All right? You'll see a lot of that on the professional tour. These guys practice, they hit a gazillion shots. Most amateurs cannot make that work. We've also seen a lot of guys where they're going to do just a straight back and straight through technique. Josh is simply not even going to move his body now. He's just going to bring his hands back like a pendulum. And the same thing. While he makes it look good there, it is not a very predictable shot. And there's nothing in that from the body whatsoever. It's all armsy. So if you're one of those two camps, if you're doing either one of those, we highly, and it's not working for you, we highly recommend that you adopt something like we're teaching here today. It's very simple to learn. It takes in about 1 hour when we go, well, the total drill sets take about 40 minutes. But outside of that, in 1 hour lesson, people are ecstatic with the results that they're getting, and they take it to the course right away. It's not something that you have to develop over time. It's not rocket science by any means, but it is very, very, very predictable, and again, you can do it with any club. Right now, how are we on time, Morgan? Think we're good? All right. We're going to show you a shot here that it pretty much gets in a lot of people's heads here. Let's say the ball is about 18 inches to 24 inches from the green, and then the pin can be wherever. It can be 5 feet, it could be 5 yards, it could be 35 feet. If we try to chip this, in other words, just move this ball 18 inches and get it to roll, all right, to the intended target, it's very difficult. Go ahead. And he did a good job there, right? But that's not always the case for the golfers on the phone, where we bladed it down, we've hit thick behind the golf ball, or we hit it sculled it, if you would, across the green, and now it's in the other fairway bunker, if you would. So, and if you think about putting a golf ball through the rough, you're making a mistake. It does not roll true, and the numbers do not bear out. So any putter play, if you would, that is not on the putting surface has less than a 10% chance to even get within 5 or 10 feet of the hole. So we don't normally teach that, but we do teach a pretty unique technique with an 8-iron, and Josh is going to demonstrate that. So again, let's say that this ball here is about 18 to 24 inches, and it could be further than that, but for our case here, about 18 to 24 inches. He's going to take his putting stance and his putting grip, and he's got an 8-iron in his hand, and he is literally just going to putt this with an 8-iron. And that is not a golf swing, that's a putt. Now you're asking me, why an 8-iron? Well, an 8-iron has enough bounce, and the bounce is simply on the golf club, is the bottom piece of the golf club. All right? In other words, how likely is it going to get the ball up in the air and get it rolling? And with an 8-iron too, it's got enough loft to clear at least 24 to 36 inches and then start rolling with topspin on it. So it's a real easy way for golfers to take the angst out of these little tiny shots. You know, you have a 350-yard, 400-yard hole. You've taken 2 shots to get 390 yards of that 400-yard hole, and now you just have 10 more yards, or even less than that. You have 5 yards to get to the actual pin, 15 feet, but you got to make this difficult shot here. So it's a very easy way to make this putt or this shot go onto the green quickly and roll with topspin towards the hole. If it was a little bit further, he would simply set up the same way, and he would just take his backswing on his putting routine just a little bit more, and now his backswing is a little bit bigger, still a putt, and that ball's going to roll just like it did just there. So, when in doubt, don't take your putter out. That's almost a rhyming, right? When in doubt, don't take your putter out. But don't take that putter out. Take your 8-iron out. Take a putting stance with your putting grip and putt that. Practice it around your local green. It doesn't matter what the rough is. It can be 2 inches in the first cut. It can be 5 inches like US GA rough. It doesn't matter, because the 8-iron will get that ball up and rolling appropriately. I don't know if I want to say it's our secret sauce, but our students love it.
It's a very consistent shot.
It's a very consistent shot, and most people don't even think about it. So that's really it as far as the short game is concerned. We don't really make it any more complicated than that. We have the 3 wedges that we recommend, like I mentioned, a 56-degree sand wedge, a 50 or 52-degree pitching wedge, and then we do recommend a lob wedge at 60 degrees. For those that only have 2 in the bag, then we do recommend they start using their 8-iron. And if they constantly play courses that do not have a lot of traps or water, then we also introduce the 7 and 8-iron, because now they can have a 75, even a 90-yard knockdown shot without really having to think twice about it, right? And that's about it. So I think we're right on time here. Tom, any questions? How'd we do?
I don't have any questions yet. I want to make sure that I open it up for questions for our guests here. I thought you guys did awesome.
Thank you.
I pointed out about 7 or 8 different flaws in my game just from this 20-minute little tutorial here. Does anybody in the audience have any questions?
Got to be one question. How Josh gets
Yeah,
so good?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dwayne Edwards, and I'm calling from High Point, North Carolina.
Hey, guys.
And if I have difficulty from time to time going left of my target, swinging above the line, what do you recommend from a sequencing standpoint to move my swing plane below the line?
Yeah, so I sense you're referencing when you say the line over the top. Is that what you're talking about?
Not a lot, but
Yeah.
from time to time.
Just enough, right? Just enough to make it aggravating, correct?
From time to time.
Yeah. So we recommend 2 things. Number one, we recommend, well, without seeing it, it's very difficult, but what we normally recommend is that Josh is going to demonstrate what the caller is talking about here. So the backswing comes back, and then right here, just simple over the top here, over the line, if you would. So the line is, in fact, the swing path, and I can demonstrate that with a hula hoop. Morgan, send me that hula hoop here. So ideally, this is the swing path that we're trying to get a golfer to swing on, which is about 70 degrees here. And Josh brings that club up just like that. If he does not, and the swing path is here, if he does not come back down on that same path, it's called coming over the top or over the line. So 2 things we recommend is number one, we want to make sure we're taking a look at this trail elbow to see where it is. And then if that elbow starts to get a little high, then that is in fact going to push this club a little forward in the downswing. The other thing we're going to look at is the sequencing of the hands. For a right-handed golfer, we want to be pushing up with our gloved hand, Josh's left hand, and we want to make sure that this golfer is in fact pulling down with that same left hand. If he or she is, then the sequencing and the likelihood of that club head coming over the line is minimized significantly. So what we do find, Josh, take it up the top of that. What we do find a lot is right-handed players, or right-handed dominant individuals as well, that this right hand is way more involved in the golf swing than the golfer even knows. So just a little bit of this pushing down, if you would, with his right hand is going to force that club over the line. And there's a really great drill that you can do at home, you can do in the office. It's simply, you're going to take your normal grip, and the normal grip should be 5 or 6 out of 10 pressure-wise, right? You're going to take your top hand, and you're going to make that top hand a 10 or a 9, really tight, gorilla grip almost. And you're going to take your bottom hand, and you're going to make that a 1 or a 0. And you're just going to take your swing as normal as possible. And you're going to notice immediately that your top hand, if you're a right-handed golfer, your left hand is going to start dominating the golf swing. And the likelihood that that club moves at all over the line is minimized significantly. That's a great question. And by the way, it's one of the biggest things that we have to deal with amateur golfers, especially double-digit handicappers. Almost all of them have some level of coming over the top. The one fallacy is we don't need to change it 100%. We just need to get it more in line, if you would. So we don't worry about a little bit of over the top. When we put someone on a simulator, if you would, or a launch monitor, and the numbers are showing a little bit over the top, as long as they're hitting the ball straight and the appropriate distance for the club, and that it's repeatable 80% of the time, we don't worry about fixing it.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You also mentioned putting the right foot back, closing the stance to kind of get things started properly on the line. Is that something that also helps in the sequencing?
Yeah, it does. Not only do we do that, Josh is going to show you another drill that we do all the time with individuals where we actually, to really start the sequencing better, well, let's answer the first question. When we drop this foot back, closing the stance a little bit, the main goal here is to flatten the golf swing. So it's very difficult for anyone to keep this swing, take it back. Yeah, your mind biomechanically will not let you do that. So an individual, to Josh's point, that normally swings here or normally gets the club back like this, once we make them drop their foot back, and we have 3 levels of it, Josh will demonstrate it. This is the first one, it's about halfway back. Josh will move his foot back even further, it's more extreme, and then even further still. So we really work on flattening that swing for the individual. And to your point, it does work and help a little bit with the sequencing. But the bigger one that really works on the sequencing is, Josh is going to line up here. This is called front side protocol. And Josh is going to flare his front foot, just to the left, about 15 to 20 degrees. This is referred to amongst golfers as kind of a Ben Hogan style stance. Mr. Hogan played like this for 35 years of his career and is credited to teaching about 25 million golfers in America this stance here. But what it does for an individual is, Josh will take it to the top of the backswing. Now, the second his hands drop to the golf ball, his left hip is more engaged than it normally is. So the golfer gets to feel what it feels like in the proper sequencing. If a golfer or an individual can feel what they're trying to accomplish, then they can accomplish it. But if they cannot sense it or feel it, there's zero chance they're going to be doing it. You can't think your way through a golf swing. You can't read your way through a golf swing. So we get this and we extend this to 15. We might even extend it 25 or 30 degrees just to get the golfer to move this left hip or their front hip first. If they do that, believe it or not, everything else will come into line. It's interesting to know, as part of the Titleist training, we work on biomechanics. So Tom and I were talking, those 400 man hours, I never thought I learned more about the human body than I could ever want to. But at the end of the day, what it does do for us is we can recognize some weaknesses in an individual and then put some appropriate drill sets to make them a better golfer and more efficient. By way of an example, look, if we don't get the hips to turn, right, at all, the shoulders do not move much. So in other words, if I turn my hips first, my shoulders lag behind me, my hands lag behind me, and my club head lags behind me, and that's what we want. But if a golfer starts to swing with their hands or their shoulders first, the hips will never catch up. Biomechanically, they cannot. So that swing looks like this, and we've all seen people on the golf course swing just with an upper body swing. So it really is critical that the golfer feel what it feels like to engage that left hip. We talk to people and some of our students, we talk about moving their left femur to their left side. That's how much, or I joke, because I'm an excellent dancer, I joke it's a bad dance move, if you would. You're here and really accentuating that turn to your left. And the more that we can get the student to feel that, the more likely they are to repeat it. And by the way, once they do it, they never go back. They absolutely will never go back. So great question.
Can we see some of those dance moves? You said you're an excellent dancer.
Yeah. So I've been married 25 years. Here's my dance move. This is it. That's all I do.
I think most all of us, that's our go-to for sure.
It's definitely the go-to. My wife is a good dancer, but not me.
Any other questions for Daniel or Josh? I have a quick one.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a question or maybe a situational thing, but we were talking last night. I don't golf a ton, but when I do, it never fails. I seem to be like in between clubs, right? So like maybe I hit my sand wedge 100 yards and I hit my 60 degree, 70 yards, but I've got an 80, 85 yard shot. What do I go with? Do I try to over club and crush my 60 degree? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but yeah. I'd like to maybe get some professional feedback on that.
Yeah, so you know what? It's so funny. I took some continuing education over COVID, and because we were in Pennsylvania, we were shut down for almost a month, and one of the classes we took was basically just the theme was say it out loud, right? And you just did just that, right? Most golfers know the answer. They know that they need to take a bigger club. And they just don't do so because they're playing well, or they've hit that 60-degree wedge 85 yards before or whatever. But some interesting stats: if you're a double-digit handicapper, you'll miss the green short 90% of the time before you'll hit it further than the green. So when you just again talk that out loud, you get your answer right there, right? Take the bigger club. You may take less of a swing, but it's absolutely a bigger confidence builder. And if you did hit it a little far, you're better off behind the green than you ever are in front of the green. So one of our most popular lessons, Josh does it more than I do these days, but are on-course lessons where we actually take our students out and we play on the course with them. And it's the number one feedback that we get, that when they say, man, just the course management itself and selecting the club selection is so much better after an on-course lesson. And it's not rocket science. We know how far the student hits the ball, and we make what's funny is the student will pick out, in your case, that lob wedge, and we'll make them hit it, and they'll come up short, and was like, hey, try this, and they hit that, and sure enough, it's a bigger club and much easier. So long-winded answer, but when in doubt, hit the bigger club. Let's talk about lies while we're on it too, right? Most individuals, amateurs that are double-digit handicappers in particular, they don't consider the lie. So with fancy watches and everything today, they'll look at their watch and they'll go, all right, I'm 100 yards out. Grab me my 100-yard club. So they grab their 100-yard club, not taking into consideration what should happen, right? So as an example, there's 3 different lies. There's your regular lie, where that ball, you can see about half that golf ball. There is a flyer lie, where you can see almost 3/4 of that golf ball. And there's a buried lie, or a down lie, where you can only see about 1/4 of that golf ball. Each one of those lies is going to go 10 yards difference. The flyer lie is going to go 110. The regular lie, normal lie, is going to go to 100, and the buried lie is only going to go 90 or 80 even. So we got to take that in consideration, how we're playing in a given day, right? There's definitely days where we can't miss the ball. There's other days where it seems like we can't hit the side of a barn. And then the last thing we teach our students is, what is the weather? Is there a weather repercussion or a topography repercussion as well? As an example, is there a wind in our face? Is it downhill? Is it uphill? All these things are going to affect the yardage significantly, and you're to take that into consideration before you grab that 100-yard club. So that's how we teach it. Quick sidebar on that.
Kind of got out there for a second. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. And just a quick sidebar on that.
What's that?
Just a quick sidebar. The golfer has to know their distances, and they have to have that distance in front of them. Meaning, to your point, you think that your wedge goes 80 yards, your lob wedge goes 80 yards, and then you look at the card of the last 5,000 shots you've taken, and the card says, you know what, I normally hit that between 70 and 80. That's not 80. That's between 70 and 80, right? So all of our students, we give them a card, it's about the size of a credit card, and they know all their distances, and they play with that in their pocket. No different than a caddy with a professional. They have their yardage books, and the caddy is talking with the professional golfer, the guy that's going to make $18 million last week, and saying, hey, you're not going to hit that 80 yards, you're only going to hit that 65 because of the wind. So we encourage that kind of static and real-time thinking, if you would, that says, hey, look, this is what I normally hit it, not what I think I hit it or what I feel I can hit it. And if you make those types of decisions based on more data-based, you'll absolutely play better golf. And we have some students that shave just 5, 7, 10 strokes off just with that alone. And that's just a simple card of what they normally hit their shots. But you got to have that. A golfer that doesn't know their exact distances will not be able to score well.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Any other questions from the audience? I appreciate it. Daniel, if you don't mind, maybe just, you talked to me a little bit yesterday about some of the things that you can offer us in addition to these golf lessons. Yeah. You had sent me an email with a couple of value adds that I thought would be pretty important for you to bring up. And then once you get done with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Nate and let him close this thing out. So I'll see myself out. Thanks to Daniel and Josh. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot, so thanks, guys. Really
thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so Tom and I were talking last night, and I'm 58 years old, and Josh is a little bit younger than me. But I, for the life of me, I can't imagine, even just 3 years ago, that we'd be doing virtual golf lessons, right? And to be honest, I resisted it for a while because value add is probably a great word. I just didn't see the value in it, and I thought, the traditional golf lesson is a personal experience. And lo and behold, COVID hits, and kind of had to get on the bus, if you would. And I'm amazed, our feedback, we chart everything in Imagen Golf, and our feedback is almost a one-on-one correlation, meaning we get just as many high marks from our online lessons as we do our in-person lessons. So, times change. It's a great way for people to get a quick opinion of their golf swing and get on the right track very quickly, as in the comfort of their own home. So you don't have to drive 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You don't have to get all sweaty, as many times or whatever. But so the virtual lesson thing has really taken hold. And as Tom alluded to earlier, we've done over 3,000 of them. So that alone says a lot about it. So as a value add to the customers or people on the phone, we're going to offer, and we'll put this on our website in about 24 hours, you're going to get a discounted option for all the virtual lessons just by giving us certain codes. So you're going to go to our resources tab at imagengolf.com, and just click on the resources tab in the top middle of the page, if you would, and you're going to see Principal there, and you're going to click on Principal, and you're going to see all the value adds. On top of the lesson value add, we are what's called a PXG ambassador, meaning all our clubs that Josh and I play are PXGs, and about probably 10 or 15% of our students have purchased those clubs from us as well. If you don't know anything about PXG, the brand was invented by Bob Parsons of GoDaddy fame. He was the CEO and president of GoDaddy and an avid golfer. And GoDaddy made him a gazillionaire, and he just decided to open up his own golf company and make the best golf clubs on the planet, period. And as ambassadors of that, we can set someone up with rental clubs anywhere in the country. We can have them drop shipped anywhere in the world, and you can try those clubs, try them on your own course, try them for a week, try them for a month if you want, and then you can buy the PXG clubs at any time, anywhere in the country. So we're going to offer a discount on the PXG experience as well. And then the last thing that we'll offer as well is some training aids. It's interesting. Every year, Josh and I go to the PGA show in Orlando, and there are more rows and rows of training aids than you could ever shake a stick at. There are probably almost 5,000 of them, man. But there's only about a handful that work, and only a handful that we endorse. So we'll make those available to you as well as a discount. But most training aids are not worth the plastic that they're printed on or the paper that they're printed on or anything of that. So, but there are a few good ones, all right, and that definitely help. An orange whip, a swing trainer, an orange whip as an example. This tool here is one that absolutely works on tempo. We endorse the lag shot trainer, so we'll put that on the website as well. So, and Tom, I think that wraps it up for us. One last thing I wanted to close with: everybody has a good golf swing. All right, everybody. My daughter standing behind the camera. She was a high-level cheerleader, but not so good with ball sports, and certainly not good with a golf club in her hand. But when we went through just a little bit of these drill protocols, in a very short amount of time, she got very good. My son played very high-level golf and was a hockey player, so that made it really easy for him. But he was off in many, many pieces of his game, and we just put these same techniques together and the same principles together, and he became one of the top golfers in the area. So it's definitely doable. There is a discipline to it, and the 7-7-7 technique, 7 in the drill, 7 regulars, and you repeat that 3 times, will get you there. Golf is not a game of repetition, so going to the driving range and hitting 100 balls in a bucket into a range and thinking you're going to get better is not going to happen. So if you're practicing appropriately and you're doing the drill sets that are akin to what you're trying to fix, you'll get better, and you'll get better quickly in about 2 or 3 weeks. If you're in our area, we would guarantee it.
Very good. Hey, Daniel and team, thank you all so much. That was a great lesson, and everybody on the call, thank you so much for the time. Tom, Caleb, and I are going to be following up here in the next probably day or 2 with a recording handout. We'll get you what Daniel said they have on the website, so we'll send you links and all that. Everybody else, have a great rest of the week, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I always just wait till they end it. So.
All right, so we're 9 minutes early. That was good.